I've always been close to my dad. My mom died when I was 6, and from that point on, it was just the two of us. He wasn't perfect. He was the type to forget permission slips and burn toast, but he was mine. He showed up to school plays with flowers in hand. He let me build a tree house in the backyard, even though he had to saw through his own weekend plans to help me build it. I wasn't the kind of kid who expected a lot, and maybe that's why it stung so much when he let me fade from his life. Things changed when I was 16. That's when he met Janet. He was different with her, more polished, like he was trying to impress her all the time. Janet was elegant in a way I wasn't used to. Where my dad used to toss his keys on the kitchen counter and call it a day, Janet bought a ceramic dish for them and labeled it keys in cursive. She moved in fast. Within 3 months, she and her daughter Bella had officially become part of our lives. Bella was 13 then. Blonde, quiet, the kind of girl who smiled at adults and never had dirt under her fingernails. The opposite of me. I remember trying to bond with her in the beginning. I invited her to paint the treehouse with me, offered her one of my books, even let her borrow a hoodie. She never returned it. One day I found it stuffed under the couch with gum in the pocket. I didn't say anything. I wanted things to work. I thought we'd find a rhythm. I was wrong. The changes started small. One day, I came home from school and found that the photos on the living room shelf had been rearranged. All of the ones of me and Dad, me in my soccer uniform, our trip to Yosemite, even one of us dressed like idiots for Halloween, were gone. Replaced with family photos. Janet, Bella, and Dad at the lake. Bella holding a ribbon at a horse show. Janet smiling with her hand on Dad's chest. When I asked where my photos were, Dad barely looked up from his paper. Oh, Janet's reorganizing. They're probably in a box somewhere. A box. Somewhere. I remember standing in my room that night, looking around and suddenly noticing what was missing. The ribbon I won in the county science fair? Gone. My 3rd grade spelling bee trophy? Nowhere. A painting I made of my mom when I was 9. It used to hang by my door. Replaced by some inspirational quote in cursive script. Family is where life begins and love never ends. The irony made me want to scream. When I confronted Janet, she smiled that tight, dismissive smile of hers. I just thought we'd give the house a little refresh. You're practically grown up now, and Bella's still young. It's important she feels at home here. It's not that I didn't understand the sentiment. I did. But it felt less like refreshing and more like erasing. I started keeping my things in boxes in my closet. Not because I had to, but because I was scared they'd disappear next. I began avoiding the common areas. I'd eat in my room, stay late at school, hang out at the library just so I wouldn't have to sit in the same room as all those new family portraits. Dad noticed, eventually. He called it moodiness. Said I was being ungrateful. That I should be glad he found someone who makes him happy. That I should try harder to make it work. I'm trying. I told him one night, the words catching in my throat. But it feels like you've replaced me. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. That was the end of the conversation. College was my escape. I got accepted into a solid environmental engineering program in Oregon. It was across the state, far enough that I only came home on holidays. Even then, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. I slept in what used to be my room, but it had been repainted. The shelves were empty. The closet had Bella's old cheerleading outfits hanging on one side. I didn't ask questions. Over the years, the distance grew. I graduated with my bachelor's, then pursued a master's. Dad showed up to my undergrad graduation alone, gave me a stiff hug, and left before dinner. He didn't make it to my master's ceremony. Janet sent a card that said, "So proud of you," in thick silver lettering. Bella wrote her name at the bottom in purple gel pen. After grad school, I wasn't sure what came next. Jobs were scarce, and money was tight. I applied everywhere. I was crashing on a friend's couch when Dad called and said, "Why don't you come stay here for a while? Until you get on your feet." I hesitated. It had been years. But I was tired, broke, and out of options. So I said yes. That was my second mistake. The house was the same from the outside. Gray shutters, a tiny porch swing, but inside it was like walking into someone else's life. Everything was beige and gold and carefully curated. Bella, now 24, had her own wing of the house. Her room, a home office, and even a spare guest room she used for her yoga equipment. When I arrived, dragging my suitcase behind me, Janet smiled and gestured toward the attic stairs. "You can set up there. It's cozy, once you get used to the slanted ceiling." I didn't expect a red carpet, but I hadn't expected the attic either. Still, I nodded and dragged my stuff upstairs. The attic smelled like mothballs and dry insulation. There was a twin bed, a dusty desk, and a lamp with a crooked shade. No closet. No drawers. Just a few boxes in the corner marked Zmaz and Bella's winter clothes. I told myself it was temporary. The days blurred. I spent hours sending out resumes, following up with companies, attending awkward Zoom interviews. I helped around the house, cooked when I could, cleaned without being asked, tried to prove I wasn't a burden. But I noticed the way Janet looked at me, like I was an unwelcome houseguest. Bella barely acknowledged me unless she wanted something. One day she asked if I could drive her to the salon because her car had a light on or something. I agreed, trying to be helpful, and she spent the whole drive on her phone, barely saying a word. I overheard Janet one evening whispering to my dad in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the attic vents carried sound. Her voice was low and sharp. "She's been here over a month, Steve. This isn't a hostel. Bella needs her space. I know, my dad muttered. She's looking for work. Janet didn't respond right away. Then, she's not a child anymore. She needs to grow up. 2 days later, I came home from a job fair to find my boxes packed. Everything I had brought, laptop, clothes, toiletries, stacked near the front door. Dad stood awkwardly beside them. What's this? I asked, my voice brittle. I think it's time, he said. You've had time to get settled. Janet, and I think it's best if you figure things out on your own now. You're kicking me out? I wouldn't put it that way. I didn't wait for the rest. I picked up my bag, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I stayed on a friend's couch for the next few nights, and then I found a tiny studio apartment through a sublet. It smelled like curry and mildew, but it was mine. I got a part-time job working at a recycling facility and kept applying for engineering positions. I didn't tell Dad where I was. He didn't ask. A few weeks later, I scrolled through Facebook and saw a post from Janet. A photo of Bella in a lab coat, holding a plaque. So proud of our future environmental engineer. My mouth went dry. I clicked the caption. Bella just got accepted into the accelerated program at Westwood University, following in her big sister's footsteps. Big sister. As if I were just a ghost in Bella's story. But I wasn't surprised. Because by then, I knew the truth. I'd been erased. After everything that happened with the attic, the boxes by the door, and the silence that followed, I stayed away from my father's house for months. I told myself I was done trying. I buried myself in job applications and short-term gigs, most of them barely paid enough to cover rent. But I was surviving. A few months after landing a contract job with a nonprofit focused on river conservation, I decided, stupidly, that maybe enough time had passed to try again. I hadn't heard from my dad since he booted me out, and part of me wanted to believe that maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he missed me. Maybe he'd realized that treating me like a disposable guest in my childhood home wasn't exactly father of the year behavior. I picked out a frame for my graduation photo. Not just any frame, an oak wood one I bought from a local artisan. The picture itself was me in my cap and gown, standing outside the university auditorium with my degree in one hand and the biggest grin on my face. Not because I thought it would matter to him, but because I wanted to remind him of who I was, of what I'd accomplished without anyone's help. I brought it over in a cloth bag. I caught Janet in the kitchen when I arrived. She was slicing cucumbers into perfect rounds, like she was auditioning for a cooking show. Bella was sprawled on the living room couch, scrolling on her phone, her legs kicked over the armrest like it was her personal lounge. Dad wasn't home yet. I just wanted to drop this off, I said, pulling the frame from my bag and holding it out like a peace offering. For the hallway. Janet looked at it for all of 3 seconds. Oh, that's nice, she said before going back to her cucumbers. Bella didn't even glance up. But when Dad came home, he gave me a half hug and said, "Look at that smile, huh? I'll hang it up this weekend. We've got the perfect spot right across from the entry mirror." For a brief moment, I believed him. I left with a nod and tried not to feel like an outsider the entire visit. I was barely there for 45 minutes. No one offered me coffee. Bella didn't speak. Janet kept glancing at the clock like I was delaying something important. But still, I left a piece of myself behind on that hallway table. I told myself it was a step. I didn't go back for 3 months. I got swamped with work, and honestly, I didn't feel like putting myself through the emotional gymnastics. But when my project wrapped up and I had a weekend off, I figured I'd drop by, maybe even bring some pastries from that French bakery on 6th Street. I'd show up unannounced and surprise them. I opened the front door with my spare key. Janet had insisted on taking it back years ago, but I'd made a copy before handing it over. I know, not the most mature move, but I wanted a backup plan. The smell hit me first, candles. Some kind of vanilla spice scent that made the air feel too heavy. I slipped off my shoes and walked down the hallway. And then I saw it. My photo was gone. In its place was a giant, high-gloss portrait of Bella in her prom dress. It had been blown up to nearly poster size and mounted in a silver frame with LED backlighting. It looked like something you'd see in a bridal shop window. Her head was tilted just slightly, that fake half-smile she always wore whenever a camera was around. Behind her was a softly blurred archway of roses. The whole thing looked professionally staged. I stood there stunned. It wasn't just that my picture had been replaced. It was the scale of the replacement. Mine had been modest, personal. This was theatrical. "Sarah," Janet's voice called out from the kitchen. I didn't answer right away. I was still trying to make sense of what I was looking at. She appeared a second later, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Didn't hear you come in." "Oh, the photo you noticed. Isn't it lovely?" I turned to face her. "What happened to the one I gave Dad?" She gave a small laugh. "Oh, that? It just didn't really match the color scheme in here. The frame was very rustic. And we're doing more of a clean, minimalist look now." "It was oak," I said flatly. She blinked. "Yes, exactly. Brown. And with all these cool tones, it just clashed, you know." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. Dad came in a few minutes later, carrying grocery bags. He gave me a short smile and a nod but didn't say much. I waited until we were alone in the hallway. "You promised to hang it," I said. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Sarah, it's just a photo. Let's not make a big deal out of it. It was my graduation." "I know. And you replaced it with Bella in a prom dress. It was Janet's idea mostly. And Bella wanted a space that felt like hers too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wasn't even asking for the spotlight, just a place on the wall. But even that was too much. I left without saying goodbye. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in me. I stopped trying to patch the cracks. I stopped pretending I was still part of that household. But things weren't quiet for long. One morning, I got a call from a woman named Natalie. She introduced herself as a former coworker of Janet's. Said she had something she thought I should know. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, and spoke with the kind of calm urgency that immediately made me feel like whatever she was about to say was serious. I used to work with Janet at Harper Company, she said. She's very strategic. Likes to position herself well. That's fine in business, but the reason I'm reaching out is because I overheard something once that's been bugging me ever since. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a voice memo. This is from an office event, she said. I recorded part of the meeting for notes, but I forgot to turn off the recorder after. This was maybe 5 years ago. She hit play. Janet's voice came through, loud and clear. I told Steve it was either the daughter or me. She's a grown woman. Why is she still taking up space in that house? Bella needs stability, not some brooding roommate moping around. I froze. Another voice responded, someone I didn't recognize. Did he actually kick her out? A pause, and then Janet again. I just packed her stuff and left it by the door. He didn't stop me. That was enough of an answer. I stared at Natalie, not sure what to say. I don't know what your relationship is with your dad, she said gently. But I thought you deserved to hear that. I left the coffee shop shaking. Not with anger, but with clarity. All that time I thought my dad had made a weak decision, failed to stand up for me. But he hadn't just failed. He had let it happen. Silently, but willingly. A few days later, I was at work when a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A literal handwritten letter, addressed in Bella's handwriting. Inside was an invitation. She was throwing a party to celebrate being accepted into an environmental policy fellowship. The same one I had applied for years ago, and hadn't gotten. She'd used parts of my thesis. Almost word for word. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I walked back into the house. Not as a daughter. Not as a guest. But as someone ready to pull the curtain back. Janet opened the door. She smiled, but it was tight. I wasn't expecting you. I'm not staying, I said. I just came to drop something off. I walked straight to the hallway. Took down Bella's glowing prom photo, carefully removed the plug from the socket, and placed my graduation photo right back where it belonged. Then I handed her the letter from Natalie, printed and highlighted. You can keep this, I said. Maybe frame it. I turned and walked out without waiting for a response. And this time, I made sure to lock the door behind me. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to investigate my own family. I wasn't raised like that. I wasn't even built for it, at least I didn't think I was. But after everything I'd seen, heard, and endured, something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to win back a family that had been slowly pushing me out for over a decade and started doing what I was good at, collecting evidence. It started with the little things. I pulled out my old journals, emails, and school paperwork. I went back through bank statements I'd saved in my inbox. I made a spreadsheet tracking everything I had once owned that had gone missing or had mysteriously been donated by Janet. My childhood violin, the one Dad had spent months paying off in installments. My bookshelf from middle school, hand-carved by my grandfather. My laptop from undergrad, which I'd left at the house during my first year of grad school and never saw again. At first, it felt petty, like I was just nursing old wounds. But the more I compiled, the more patterns I started to see, especially around money. My college tuition had mostly been covered by scholarships and work study, but there was always a fallback account, an education fund my mom had started for me before she died. I'd seen the paperwork once when I was 15. It had $150,000 in it, and I remember my dad telling me it was mine, no matter what. Your mom set it up for you, he said. Not even I can touch it unless it's for your education. Except, I'd never touched that money. Not once. By the time I was in grad school, I was taking out federal loans, scrimping on groceries, and applying for assistantships just to stay afloat. Every time I brought up the fund, Dad would dodge the question. I need to look into that, he'd say. It might have been consolidated into something else. At the time, I believed him. Now I didn't. I requested my credit report and bank records. I filed a formal request through the trustee that managed my mom's estate, something I should have done years ago. When the documents arrived, I felt physically sick. The fund was empty. Worse, it had been emptied gradually between 2013 and 2018, during the exact time Janet and Bella had moved in. Some of the money had gone to Bella's private school tuition. Some of it had been used for home upgrades, a new HVAC system, granite countertops, and a full kitchen remodel. But the biggest transfer, dated June 17, 2018, was $327,000. The memo read, down payment, Mountain Ridge property. I Googled the address. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house in Boulder, Colorado. Mountain views, wraparound porch, finished basement. Registered under Janet Hollings and Associates, LLC. I couldn't breathe. I took screenshots of everything. Bank records, transfer confirmations, property listings, even cached Zillow entries. Then I started digging deeper. I found that Janet had formed a private LLC 2 months before the down payment, likely to write the purchase off as a business investment. But she didn't have a business. She worked part-time doing interior decorating and used her title as leverage in social circles. That LLC existed for one reason: to buy that house. With my mother's money. The next step was figuring out how she'd accessed it. I requested access logs from the bank. It took some back and forth, but eventually I learned that the trustee had been replaced in 2012 by my father. He had power of attorney over the fund. He'd petitioned for it, claiming that as my sole surviving parent, he needed flexibility in managing Sarah's financial future. It was all legal. And completely deliberate. I felt something in me break. I'd spent so long excusing him, telling myself he was manipulated, overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable. But no, he'd chosen this. He'd handed over my inheritance, my future, to Janet and Bella like it was a tip. I needed help. Not emotional support, I needed legal expertise. I contacted an attorney named Lena Ford, a quiet but brilliant woman who specialized in inheritance fraud. She'd handled high-profile cases in 3 states and had the kind of energy that made you sit up straighter when she walked into the room. I handed her the documents, the spreadsheets, and the emails. She scanned them silently, then looked up at me. "This is bad," she said. "But it's not unwinnable." She explained that while my father had legal authority over the fund, he had a fiduciary duty to use it solely for my benefit. Diverting those funds to someone else, especially someone who wasn't a legal dependent, could be considered a breach of fiduciary duty and possibly misappropriation. "But we'll need more," she said. Emails. Statements. Proof that he knew what he was doing. And that Janet played a role. So I kept digging. I started with the house in Boulder. I contacted a former neighbor named Phil Martin, who lived 2 doors down from the property. I told him I was conducting a legal review for a client and asked if he remembered who lived there. "Oh yeah," he said. Real loudmouth type. Blonde lady. Showed up in a Mercedes like she was too good for the street. Lived there with her daughter for about 2 years. "What about her husband?" I asked. "No husband." Said she was divorced. Said the place was hers, through her design firm or whatever. That was what I needed. If Janet had claimed the house solely as hers, without naming my dad, it bolstered the argument that he had knowingly given her property bought with my education funds. Then I found something else. Emails. Old ones, from an account I hadn't used in years. They were mostly spam, but buried inside was a thread from 2015. My dad had forwarded me an email titled, "Interior Remodel Proposal, Hollings Residence." Attached was a quote from a contractor detailing a $78,000 kitchen overhaul. The recipient? janet.hollings@gmail.com. And in the original message, Janet wrote, "Once this goes through, Bella's going to have a dream kitchen to make her breakfast before school. Thanks again for pushing the trustee thing through. I couldn't have done it without you." That was it. Proof of her involvement. Proof that he did it for her. Not for me. I printed everything and brought it to Lena. She read the email twice, then nodded slowly. "We have enough to file," she said. "But I want to do it strategically." We filed a civil suit against both my father and Janet for misappropriation of trust funds and breach of fiduciary duty. We served the papers discreetly, at their front door on a Tuesday morning, when I knew Janet would be home from yoga and Dad would be back from a grocery run. I didn't hear from them for 4 days. Then the text started. From Dad, "Why are you doing this?" From Janet, "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we gave you." From Bella, "Hope the lawsuit is worth it. Don't forget who paid for your food all those years." I didn't respond to any of them. Then came the threats. They tried to countersue for emotional distress. Claimed I was trying to sabotage the family and ruin Janet's career. Lena shut that down quickly. She filed a motion to dismiss and included a motion for full discovery, bank statements, emails, even recorded phone calls. It escalated fast. During depositions, Janet denied everything. But then we produced the contractor email. Her face went pale. Dad tried to claim he thought the money was community property. Lena calmly pulled out the original trust document, signed by both my parents, explicitly stating the fund was for the sole and exclusive benefit of Sarah Hollings, to be used for education and career development. They were trapped. But the most shocking moment came 2 weeks before the court hearing, when I received a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a note written in block letters. "You should know what really happened. This isn't about money." I plugged in the drive. It contained a single video file. It was a security camera clip, grainy footage from the Boulder house. It showed Janet in the living room, pacing, screaming at someone off screen. Bella appeared in the frame, crying. "You need to stop pretending this is your house," Janet yelled. "He gave us this because she didn't deserve it. That stupid girl doesn't even know how to talk to people. She'd waste it all on science projects and bugs." "She's your daughter," Bella said through tears. "No, she's not. She's just the baggage that came with the man I married." I couldn't stop shaking. Someone, maybe Phil, the neighbor, or maybe a contractor, had sent it anonymously. I gave the video to Lena. She added it to the exhibits list. We never made it to trial. A week later, their lawyer called and offered a full settlement, repayment of the full $450,000, an official statement of misappropriation filed in court, and a permanent restraining order filed against both of them per my request. Bella was not included. Technically, she hadn't touched the fund. But her silence all those years spoke volumes. I accepted. They signed. I got my money. But I never got an apology. and I never went back. After the settlement, I thought things might finally quiet down. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted accountability. And in some ways, I thought that was what I got. But what came next went far beyond anything I expected. The restraining order was issued 3 days after the settlement. I didn't even have to attend the hearing. Lena handled it. The judge signed it without hesitation after reviewing the documents and the video footage from the Boulder house. Janet was officially barred from contacting me, speaking about me publicly, or approaching within 300 feet of my home or workplace. My father wasn't named in the order, but I hadn't heard from him since the lawsuit. The silence between us had become a wall. The media caught on faster than I anticipated. Someone, possibly from Lena's office, or maybe one of the clerks, leaked the case summary. It hit a local news site under the headline, "Interior designer accused of misusing stepdaughter's education fund to buy luxury property." From there, it spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Janet wasn't just a manipulative stepmother. She was a public example. That's when everything began unraveling for her. Janet had made a name for herself in our city as a kind of suburban influencer. She ran a home decor blog with sponsored content, gave free workshops at local interior design stores, and was one of those people who always made the neighborhood newsletters. She volunteered at charity luncheons, sat on the board of a small community foundation, and played golf with the wives of mid-level executives. That world evaporated overnight. The backlash was immediate and merciless. Brands she had worked with released public statements cutting ties. Her blog's comment section flooded with angry messages, and several of her social media accounts were deleted within days. A viral Twitter thread titled, "How One Woman Decorated Her Home with Stolen Money," circulated for weeks. One of her closest allies, a woman named Elise Parkman, a realtor and former client of Janet's, posted a scathing video online. Elise had hired Janet to stage her home for sale the year before, and had once called her a breath of tasteful inspiration. Now she called her a con artist with expensive taste. "I recommended her to everyone," Elise said on camera. "And now I have to call my clients and explain that the woman who decorated their home stole money from her own stepdaughter." The local paper did a feature on the case, which included a summary of the court's findings. The court confirmed that emotional manipulation, asset misappropriation, and undue influence had occurred over a prolonged period. While no jail time was imposed, thanks in part to the civil nature of the case, Janet was ordered to pay a $45,000 fine, undergo a full financial audit by an independent third party, and complete 160 hours of community service. And she had to do it publicly. The court mandated that her community service hours take place within visible municipal functions, like cleaning up public parks, working food distribution lines, and assisting in neighborhood waste programs. No behind-the-scenes office work. This wasn't just punishment. It was public humiliation. I didn't go to watch, but others did. A friend of mine, Lauren, spotted her cleaning trash near Grant Park on a Saturday afternoon. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, Lauren texted me. Full orange vest, hair pulled back. People were pointing. One guy took photos. Photos that, naturally, ended up online. But the biggest fallout wasn't social. It was personal. Her marriage crumbled within weeks. Dad didn't say a word to me. I didn't expect him to. But a month after the restraining order went through, I got a message from someone I didn't know. A woman named Michelle Ortega. She introduced herself as a paralegal working in the office that handled my father and Janet's prenuptial agreement. Michelle was technically bound by confidentiality, but she reached out on a personal basis, off the record. "I just thought you should know," her message read. "Your father has initiated divorce proceedings." He didn't contest the settlement. He also withdrew from the joint account they used for mortgage payments. Janet's on her own now. The timing made sense. Without Dad's financial support, Janet could no longer afford to hold onto the Boulder house. The property had already been flagged by local investigators as part of the civil case. While the court hadn't seized it, the investigation made it toxic on the market. The listing went up a few days later. "Stunning mountain views," it read. "Modern architecture, luxury kitchen, finished basement." But what caught my eye was the price drop. Originally listed at $1.2 million, the house had been reduced by $60,000. A bright red banner under the price read, "Property subject to prior financial review." A friend of mine in real estate, Tasha, explained that meant the house had been tagged by buyer's agents as a flagged property, essentially something worth investigating carefully due to legal baggage. Tasha even forwarded me a screenshot of an internal MLS comment from another realtor. "Be aware of previous fraud claims involving this address. Buyer advised to conduct extensive background check." It was surreal. That house had been Janet's crown jewel. Now it was radioactive. Meanwhile, Bella vanished from the public eye. Her fellowship was quietly revoked by the Environmental Foundation once they discovered that parts of her application included large excerpts plagiarized from my graduate thesis. I didn't report her, someone else did. Probably someone within the organization who connected the dots after the media coverage. Her name was removed from the program's website. Her Instagram, once filled with lab selfies and curated quotes about sustainability, went dark. One of her old classmates from undergrad, Jeremy, reached out to me weeks later. "I know we weren't close," he wrote, "but I thought you should know. Bella always made you sound like you dropped out, like you couldn't handle grad school. She acted like you were some cautionary tale." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. What surprised me most was how people began to approach me. Not just friends, but strangers. People who had read the articles or seen the footage and recognized something in their own lives. A woman named Dina sent me a message saying her stepmother had done something similar, draining a college fund after her father died. A man named Raj told me he'd been pushed out of the family business after his stepbrother manipulated their mother into rewriting the will. I thought I was crazy, he wrote. Now I realize I wasn't alone. I never set out to become an example, but the story had resonated. Not because of the money, but because of the quiet cruelty behind it, the kind of erasure that's hard to name, let alone prove. The court required Janet to issue a written statement admitting partial responsibility. She submitted it late, 3 days past the deadline, and only after being threatened with contempt. The statement was bland, heavily reviewed by lawyers, and filled with passive language, regret, misjudgment, complex family dynamics. It didn't say my name once. But it didn't matter. Because her world had already imploded. Her business folded within 6 months. Yelp marked her business profile as closed. Her home decor website went offline. Her car was repossessed, according to a neighbor. The last time I heard about her, she had taken a temp job managing supply orders for a janitorial services company. I didn't feel triumphant. But I did feel free. And that was enough. The day I crossed into Vancouver, it was raining. Not a storm, just a slow, steady, gray drizzle that softened everything it touched. I sat in the back of the cab, forehead resting against the window, watching as the city emerged around me like a memory I hadn't made yet. Wide streets lined with green, clean glass buildings reflecting clouded skies, people wrapped in jackets moving with purpose but not panic. I hadn't told many people I was leaving. After the trial and the aftermath, I needed a real break. Not just from Janet or my father, but from the place itself. Every neighborhood in my hometown had a memory stitched to it like an old scar. My first science fair. My mom's last birthday. The bench where I sat after Janet threw out my childhood violin, claiming it was taking up space in the garage. I needed a clean page. Vancouver gave me that. I'd found the job almost by accident. An old professor from grad school had posted about an opening in the comment section of a professional forum. The role was unusual. Director of Watershed Sustainability Initiatives at a mid-sized environmental nonprofit called Pacific Roots. It was funded partially by a private foundation and partially by municipal grants. The work was big. Climate adaptation, indigenous land consultation, water purity tracking, habitat preservation. It was the kind of role I'd dreamed of but never thought I'd get. But I applied anyway. Sent in my resume, my thesis, a link to the case summary from the lawsuit, not to make them feel sorry for me, but because I wanted them to know who they were hiring. I was no longer interested in hiding what I'd been through. I got the job. Not just as a staff member, they made me the project lead. I signed the offer letter while sitting on the floor of my mostly empty apartment, still surrounded by cardboard boxes and old post-it notes from the legal case. My first day at Pacific Roots felt like stepping into an alternate universe. The office was open but calm, plants in every corner, light-colored wood desks, people in jeans and hiking boots. My team was small but fierce. Rachel, an indigenous land rights expert with a biting wit and a background in restoration ecology, Min, our GIS analyst who could map soil erosion patterns faster than most people could order coffee, and Jonah, a marine biologist turned freshwater consultant who had left academia after a nervous breakdown and now spent his days wading into rivers with the serenity of a monk. We clicked faster than I expected. I wasn't used to people who listened when I spoke, who asked questions, not to challenge or undermine, but to learn. There was a kind of ease between us, the kind that comes only when people don't see you as someone who needs to be fixed. I spent the first few months learning the territory. Vancouver was beautiful, but it was also a city of contradictions. Green initiatives on paper, but corporate pollution in the bay. Eco-branded condos beside displaced homeless camps. I dove into the work like it was a second spine. Late nights, early mornings, field visits in the rain. My boots were never dry, and I didn't care. But something strange happened in that time. Something I hadn't planned for. I started hearing from family again. Not my father. I'd cut that tie the moment I walked out of the courtroom. But others. My mom's side mostly. People I hadn't seen since her funeral. A cousin named Elise reached out first. She lived in Alberta, taught high school history, and had only recently heard what happened through a relative who saw one of the news articles. Her message was simple: I'm sorry. We should have stayed in your life. I replied cautiously. But we talked. And then we called. Then we FaceTimed. Eventually, she came to visit. We spent a rainy Saturday walking through Queen Elizabeth Park, laughing at old stories, piecing together family photos I hadn't seen in years. She gave me a folder, a worn, creased folder with my mother's handwriting on the cover. Inside were letters. Letters my mother had written to me before she died. One for each birthday until I turned 21. My father had never given them to me. I read the first 5 in silence that night, curled up on my small couch with my blanket pulled to my chin. My mother's handwriting was small and slanted. The ink faded but legible. If you're reading this, you're probably taller than I ever imagined. Maybe still messy. Maybe not. But I hope you remember that I love you. That nothing about who you are could ever make me love you less. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember waking up with the letters still clutched in my hands. Not long after that, I received an email. From Bella. The subject line was blank. The message was short. Can we talk? My first instinct was to delete it. Then I saw the attachment, a PDF. It was a scanned, handwritten letter. She had written it on lined paper, the kind you tear out of a spiral notebook. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, neat, round letters, the occasional heart over an I that she hadn't grown out of. I clicked on the document. Sarah, I know I don't deserve your time. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say this now, because I couldn't say it then. I was wrong. I let things happen that shouldn't have. I watched our mom replace you in that house and said nothing. I let her lie to you, to everyone. I used your space. I used your silence. And then, when it all blew up, I stayed quiet again because I was scared and selfish and thought silence would protect me. It didn't. I lost the fellowship. I lost my credibility. I lost my voice. And maybe I deserved that. But I never wanted to erase you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If you don't want to respond, I understand. But I hope you're okay. I hope you're more than okay. Bella. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. Just stillness. She hadn't asked for a second chance. She hadn't justified anything. It wasn't perfect, but it was something I never thought I'd get, acknowledgement. I wrote back, eventually. I told her I appreciated the apology. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't say I hated her either. I said I was okay. And I meant it. That same week, we had a huge breakthrough on the Pacific Roots project. Our team had been working with several First Nations groups to identify contamination risks in one of the protected watersheds north of the city. We'd suspected a specific logging company of leaking harmful byproducts into the tributary, but getting proof was difficult. Then one morning, Min came into the office with a grin. I got it, he said, holding up a USB drive. Drone footage. Night operation. Unauthorized chemical dumping. Time-stamped. It's all there. It was more than we'd hoped for. We packaged the evidence, filed the complaint, and 2 months later, the logging company was slapped with a $2 million environmental fine and ordered to halt operations in the area. Our names made the headlines, not just mine but the whole team. My photo was included in the press release. This time, no one cropped me out. No one replaced me. That moment did something to me. Not because it was public recognition, but because it felt real. Permanent. I wasn't a background character anymore. I wasn't the stepdaughter hidden behind decorative mirrors and LED-lit prom portraits. I was a scientist. A director. A person whose work left footprints. My story, all of it, had been preserved. In documents. In public records. In court filings and newspaper articles. In water samples and satellite images and grant reports. No one could erase me anymore. I keep the folder Elise gave me in a drawer at my desk. On days when the clouds roll in thick and low, when the rain blurs the window so much I can't see the street, I pull out one of my mother's letters and read her words again. And I remind myself. I was never the one who disappeared. I was the one who returned.